Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Gavin Green. I look after strategic solutions for XMPro. I want to thank you all for attending today. If you have any questions, put them into the chat. I think there's a question section as well. I'll try and get to them at the end as we go through it. So in today's webinar, what we're going to go through is how to accelerate your digital twin use cases using our blueprints, accelerators, and patterns as well. Before we start though, we just need to make sure that we're aligned on some of the terminology. Make sure that when we're talking an accelerator or pattern, everyone's on the same page on the topic. So to do that, it's easier if I just open it up and we just go through this. So starting from the bottom, each of these tends to build on each other. So patterns on the far right here, we see these as pre-configured data streams. We also see widgets, and I'll explain what the difference is when I go into that, form part of the patterns on the right here. The accelerators, that is typically a Jupyter notebook from our AI or our notebook section. It could also be 1 or 2 pages. It could also be a set of recommendations with the data stream. So it builds on the patterns just a little bit more. And then blueprints, you could see those as pre-built solutions. So they're typically around a specific use case, and they will contain data streams, recommendations, some app visualizations, templates, etc. What are some of the benefits by using templates? Why are we having this discussion around blueprints, accelerators, and patterns? And what does it mean for me and my organization, for those watching today? So some of the key benefits for this is lower cost of deployment. You can integrate your siloed data using best practices. You're going to shorten your time to value, and that plays into the next one as well, which is improving your internal personal productivity. You don't have to spend a lot of time working all the intricate details and bits and pieces out. You can use this as your starting platform and then just adapt it and change it to your own requirements as well. You can increase your return on your value proposition. Again, these all tie into the shortened time to value piece at the top, which is really the key thing here around all 3 of them. It doesn't matter if it's a pattern, an accelerator, or a blueprint. It really is, how do we do things a lot quicker and get to our end result a lot faster. The last one is an interesting where you can get the domain knowledge from our partners as well as ourselves around certain use cases. Again, you can import these, adapt them, change them to your own requirements, but just some of the benefits of using the templates themselves. When it comes to our suite of products, which pieces do these touch? It's going to touch all 4 of them. It's going to touch the data streams, the AI, the app designer, and also the recommendation manager as well. So it touches all 4 of them as you see them here. Going back to my iceberg analogy slide. Patterns, you'll find right down the bottom here. The patterns are touching the data stream side, so the DS, data wrangling, analytics, integration, orchestration. When we start talking around the accelerators will be touching the AI piece. They could be touching the recommendation manager piece as well as the data stream. And then you have your blueprints, and blueprints will go from the top all the way down, whether it's the app designer, recommendations, AI, or data streams. You'll notice down the bottom there, the subscription manager. We don't actually touch anything in the subscription manager for all 3 of them, so patterns, accelerators, or blueprints. The subscription manager is just where you control your access to the different pieces. So remember, when you're importing and creating your different blueprints or even your accelerators, make sure you set up the correct access for your team. If you want to share them, either read access or write access to them as well. If you don't do that, no one else will be able to use those different components as well. So let's dive into what is it that we're actually looking at here and how do I get hold of them. If I go into our documentation website, On the far left, you'll see there is a link which says Blueprints, Accelerators, and Patterns. What that'll do is that'll take you to a website. This website is hosted in GitHub itself, and you can see Blueprints, Accelerators, and Patterns. If we start at the bottom and work our way all the way to the top, if we go to Patterns, it will list all the different patterns that we have published. Now, we published these. If you wish to contribute, I will have a link right at the end, which will walk us through how to contribute and make your own patterns, accelerators, or blueprints available here, and you can merge them in as well. Patterns is broken up into two main sections that I have available here. The AI, these will be data streams, and then widgets, which will be used in the app designer. This is a constantly evolving site. As we have new items added in either of the three sections, they will be added to these pages, and you'll be able to access them as well. If you click the view details on any of them, it'll take you down into the actual component itself. So this is the asset monitoring using binary classification. Across the top, you have your visuals. So if you click into those, you can actually see what they look like from the visual perspective. Just clicking out of that will close them. On the left, you will see all the pages will have a set of common items. The one is going to be the import password. Whenever you try and import anything, it doesn't matter if it is a widget, it doesn't matter if it's a data stream, recommendation, or an app, you need an import password. We use the same password for all of these items just to make it easier for people to integrate and use these. All you can do is just double click and copy this particular password here, and then you can use it when you're importing. If you're looking for instructions on how to import, you can click this particular link here. It will take you to our documentation site, which will list out the import, export, and all the different components from our documentation site as well. It does not matter if it's a data stream, recommendation, etc. It's all on this particular site here on how to import. It will walk you through the different details for that as well. And then lastly, there'll be a file section which will contain the various components that you are going to need. This particular example has two. There's a SQL script and there's a data stream. If you go and open the script, you'll notice that it'll actually take you to the repository at the back, which has the components that you need to actually run it. So in this example, this would be the SQL script. So you can just copy the actual text here, run this against your SQL environment, go back, and now you can open up the data stream, and again you can just download the actual data stream to import it as well. It does not matter if this is a full blueprint, and I'll show you a few examples on that as well. It follows the same principle here with regards to the section on the left. The components in the middle, you'll see a table of contents will allow you to jump around the different items that we're looking at. The data stream will just highlight what are some of the items that are used in the data stream. So if you want to learn a little bit more, you want to get a bit more comfortable with a particular pattern in this example, which of the agents are we using? And again, each of these will take you and allow you to drill down into that particular documentation, and you can find out more information as you want to or need to. Right at the bottom are the typical steps to follow to import. It does not matter if this is, again, a pattern accelerator or a blueprint. You're going to follow the very similar steps to import. The key thing at the top there, though, is making sure that you have a set of variables defined. These variables are typically created when you're installing the site. But again, it's just good to make sure that you have them when you are importing. So what do I mean by these variables? You need to have specific access, and you'll notice here on the left there is variables. I'm in the app designer right now. If I just click the hamburger and I click variables, it'll open up the variables for me. What we're looking for is to make sure you have the app designer URL and the app designer integration key. You will notice that there is an app designer URL inside the app designer, and if we go into the data streams, you will find one in there as well. Just a reminder, variables are shared. So if you define it in the app designer, it'll be available in the data stream and vice versa. However, you do need to apply your variables in both systems. The reason for that is each of them is using a different encryption key, specifically when you are encrypting the values in here. So just keep that in mind when you are actually creating or confirming the variables that you've set them in both environments. You'll see here in the App Designer, I can go down and I can see my integration key. If I go into the data stream, you can see I've set them as well. If you have not set them, how do you know? You can see all the items here which have the chevron next to them have not been set in the App Designer, whereas in the Data Stream Designer, they have been set. So that's how you can very quickly tell have they been configured or not. Do you need to configure them in both environments? It depends on your use case and how you're going to use these particular variables. Inside the App Designer, I'm not going to be using the actual Twilio or the MLflow capabilities, but inside my data stream I am. That's why they are configured for me in here. So important across the top, make sure that you have these defined to be able to use this data stream in this example. You'll notice that we're talking around SQL username password down here. The reason we are is a lot of the accelerators and patterns are set to specific data sources that we have defined. Now, when you are actually loading in these accelerators, if I just open up this particular one that we are looking at here, you will see in this data stream, we have two items. One, which is going to be where's my data coming from, but two, where is my context coming from? If you want to change your context, you can. Just make sure that over here, you're obviously creating the variables to whatever system you are changing it to when you load it in. So step one is really just confirming your variables. Where are you going to be getting your data from to be able to do anything? The App Designer, these two here is required when you are trying to run a recommendation using our recommendation manager, or you are looking to pass data to our visuals. That is why you've defined the two of those. If you do not have that defined, you will not be able to use these two agents on this particular data stream itself. Second, run the SQL script. So here you will see the smart meter. Again, if I open that up in another window, you will see what it is that you are actually creating and configuring. Again, do you have to use this in your own environment? No. By all means, you can swap that piece out and drag on another context provider from the library as you need to or want to bring it in. Second, importing the data stream. So first thing that you would need to do is make sure that you download the data stream from this particular environment here. So you can see here is the data stream itself, the extension XUC. So here I can just click the download and it'll download the actual file for me to be able to use for that. Next thing, we want to import that particular data stream. It follows the same process. If you go into the data streams, you will see there is an import option. If you click that, it's going to ask you for a file key. This file key is this key that we've copied across the top here, which is the import password. Again, we use the same password for all three sections just to make it a lot easier for folks to use. So if you just put the key in there, and now you can actually please select the file to upload. And now we can say upload. What this will do is it will check your site as well, and it'll do the same for recommendations. It'll do the same for apps. If it picks up that there is already a version of that, it's going to ask you a question. Do you want to import it as a new version, or do you want to import it as a completely new entity of that thing? This one is a data stream, so I'm going to get the option there. It'll do the same for a recommendation. It'll do the same for an app as well. If you want to just say a new version, it'll just increment the version and create this as the new version. Even if that app recommendation or data stream is published, it'll create a new version, but it's not going to take that version live. You still need to go in and edit it and change it. Because this is a data stream, it's going to ask me where do I actually want to run it, and I can put it into the correct collection. Make sure that you are following the the actual blade itself, it's going to ask you different questions depending on what it is that you want to import for the different areas. If I go into my new data stream, I can give it a name, put it in a category, but again, I still have my collection designation as well. Once we've imported that, then it is available for our use. And as I go into this particular example, you can now change and configure it. So next step, once we've imported it, assign access to others as required. Again, it applies to all the different areas as well. You need to decide who else is going to be using this with you. Because this is the data stream, we can go into the manage access and make sure you're giving access to the correct people. Also define what type of access you want to give them. You want to give them read access, write access, or co-owner access to it as well. Read access will just allow you to view the code components and content. Write will allow you to edit, and co-owner access will typically allow you to change other people's access rights to it as well. If you have read access to items, you cannot publish or unpublish that component, whether it is a data stream, whether it's a recommendation, or whether it's an actual app itself. All you can do is edit it. And by edit, I mean you can go in and configure and see what the items are. You can make changes to it. It'll give you the little asterisks that will ask you to save, but as soon as you try and save, it'll tell you you do not have access to that, and you will not be able to save it as well. Important, have a look at the different components that you, and this is specifically important with regards to the data streams themselves. When you're importing them, you need to make sure that you double click anything that is a XMPro app and it's correctly configured to use the URL and the key. The same for the recommendation. Make sure that it is correctly set up to use the key and the URL as well. What you also need to do is make sure that your context provider is pointing to whatever data source it is that you've defined. This one is pointing to the SQL because we've loaded the SQL across the top into there as well. So you need to make sure that that's been defined as well. The recommendation, make sure it's pointing to the correct URL and key. Just click apply, save, and that should be all you need to do. The entity items, the different components down here, you don't need to remap those or reset those. All you really need to do is just make sure that your connection properties are set. Typically your URL and your key. If I come into the SQL, again, make sure that it's pointing to the correct instances here, making sure it's your correct database, you're correct, and it'll automatically start filling in the rest of the items for you as well. And then right at the bottom, just clicking apply, publish, and ensure that you are getting data coming through for all of these. So once you've configured everything and it is ready to go, make sure you hit publish, go to the live view, and typically pick the item before the run recommendation as well as the app. So here you'll see predict is the item coming out of the AI, post telemetry is coming out of the action agent. Depending on the data stream that you've configured, it'll take a bit just to run. This one's running a predictive model, loading a lot of data and contextual data, so it'll take a little bit of time to come through. Make sure you've got the data flowing through this particular section here before you continue onwards, i.e. going in, loading an app, loading a recommendation, etc. You can see the data is coming through now across the top, which means we've configured this correctly, and we can either leave it running and continue on to the next step, or we can unpublish it depending on what the use case for this item is. Accelerators, if I go into the top, will tend to build on patterns. But before we go into accelerators, there's this another area on patterns which is around widgets. Now, what a widget is it is into the realm of the app designer, and it really is how do I create individual components that I don't have to spend a lot of time trying to move everything pixel perfect for it. So what we've done here is we've curated a list of a lot of different widgets that we tend to reuse over and over again, just to make it quicker and easier for folks to actually use inside the app designer. Again, it's going to follow the same principle. Across the top, you will have your visuals. These visuals here, you will see this is what the actual run state will look like. There is the configure states as well. Because this is inside the app designer, there's two themes. There's a light theme and a dark theme. On the left, you have your same thing, which is importing the password, as well as the file, as well as the widget. So if I open up that particular widget, you'll see it'll take me, again, back into the GitHub repo, and it'll allow me to download those particular files themselves. So where are these widgets and how do I use them? Inside the app designer, if I go into a particular application, so I'm going to go into my one example here. If you go into the edit mode, as if you were configuring a particular app itself. On this particular area here, you'll see under blocks on the left, there's a widget section. You have two icons here which will allow you to export a widget or import a widget. If you tell it you want to import, it's going to ask you for a key. This is the same key that we've got across the top. That is what we're interested in. So you paste the key there, and then you upload the actual widget file itself that you are interested in. All of the widgets have a file that will allow you to import that particular widget. So depending on what it is that you are looking to actually use and reuse in your applications, you just load the appropriate widget for that. Where the widgets actually appear is if you expand the accordion, you'll see all your widgets will appear here as well. If I drag one on, you'll notice that it will drag the item in for me as well. Most of the widgets that we configure will be from a content card perspective. So you'll see here we have cards, and here is a content card that will actually drag it in. If I drag in the other one, you'll see this one is dynamic and this one is static. Why do we have two of these items? Depending on your use case. The one on the right here means I have a static view. It's not going to change. I'm only going to have so many columns. You can now come in and change as you want to or need to. So if you're not interested in having all the columns, you can come in and actually remove a column. Now I've only got 3 columns. Each of these, if you click on an item and go to page layers, you will notice that there is typically a data source that's been defined in the page layer themselves. So if I click the data source, it will allow me to bind this to a particular data source itself. So here I can go into the page data, create myself a data source, typically pointing to a data stream. And if I go to the block properties, I can actually bind this particular data source to it. And now I can come in and start binding, as I would normally, the actual text to any of the properties coming in from that particular data source itself. All the widgets function in a very similar fashion, where anything that has data sources will allow you to map them and move them as well. Again, this is static. This one's a little bit more dynamic. What that means is you'll notice this section here, we've only defined one. The data source is going to dictate how many columns it's actually going to be creating for me. And you'll find this pattern follows through in a lot of the actual widgets themselves. There will typically be a static one, but there will also be a dynamic one, whether it's columns or rows, which will allow you to grow the actual app pieces itself. If I click in here and go to the page layers, you'll see there is the total data source and there is the child data source. So this is typically where you would put the data source itself, and then you just map the items, and then it'll configure everything for you. I mentioned 2 themes. The widgets, unless otherwise specified, will function in both themes themselves. So if I go into the dark theme and I drag these 2 widgets in as well, you will notice that they will be colored appropriately and they will match that particular theme itself. So if I go and actually launch this, you can see there are my items. If I go to my light theme, there are my items as well. Because I bound this one to the data source, you will notice that it's actually going to duplicate the items. So let's go in there, let's remove the data source for the moment, and we can then have a look at how this is actually rendering. So this is what it would look like in the light theme. this is what it'll look like in the dark theme. I didn't have to change anything. I didn't have to edit anything. I can just drag them on, use them, and configure them as I need to. And that follows the same for pretty much all the widgets in here. And there's a lot of different widgets in here. This list is constantly being added to. We're constantly growing it. If you have something that you feel you'd like to put in here, by all means, send it in or contribute it as well to this particular list. The last item I'll touch on is blueprints. So inside blueprints, we're building on the other two items themselves. So patterns, typically you have your data streams and widgets. Inside accelerators, you will see here, these are typically one-page apps. So this one here would be, I've just got a visual which is just showing me 3D items and how do I bind them to a Unity view. So there is an app over here, and there is a data stream. Again, it'll walk you through what are some of the key pieces in it, but the steps you'll notice is very similar to what we've just gone through with the pattern, confirming your variables, importing what you need to do, importing the application, and then just running it from there. Inside the accelerators, there is an AI section as well. So here, if I open this up, we'll load the quick start guide for our Jupyter notebooks or our notebooks themselves. Any of the other notebooks that we make available will appear in here as well and will function under the accelerators. Coming into blueprints, you'll notice they just keep building on each other here. So the blueprints themselves, if I go into a particular example in here, across the top, you have your visuals. Again, you can click through that and see what all the different components are in that blueprint itself. On the left, you just have a lot more items to import. You've still got the same instruction, you still have the same password. Here you have the application and template. There are the recommendations, data stream, and any data scripts that are needed. Same principle applies here. When you are importing your data streams, you can adjust and change where your data is coming from. You can also adjust and change your recommendations. So if the thresholds are not to your liking, change and adjust them as well. You'll see same pattern. Make sure your variables are defined, running any of your scripts that need to be run. There is a sequence to importing a blueprint. Typically, you will import your data streams, then you'll import your recommendations. There are times when you may be importing a second data stream in between the two, especially if it's working on a recommendation. That will be called out in the actual steps themselves. And then last, you'll import your application for it. When you're importing your application, you'll notice down here, it'll call out specific steps that you need to do. This is when you're linking to recommendations and where you need to do that. The reason for doing application last is if you were to do application first, one of the options on an import is going to ask you to bind it to the different data streams. If you've not imported those data streams yet, you can leave it blank, but you're going to have to go and manually set that up afterwards. That's why the application is typically last, because you already imported your data streams, you've imported your recommendations, and you should just be able to match everything when you import it. It makes the experience a lot quicker and a lot more pleasant when you are loading those in. If we come back to the items that we've got here, again, there's three areas. They typically build on top of each other: patterns, accelerators, and blueprints. So how do I contribute and where do I get access to these? So for contributions, the link across the top, the QR code will take you straight to that particular link itself. Or for direct access, you can click that link at the bottom as well. If you don't want to remember those particular links, what you can do is just go to our documentation website, documentation.xmpro.com, click the link on the left, and it'll take you to that website as well. Perfect. While I keep this up here, let's see if we've got any questions from anyone in the audience. We do. Okay, so one question here is around Okay, so if you want to contribute, there's two ways you can contribute to it. If you're not comfortable loading them into the repository or where to put it or how to style it, by all means, you can send it to us, whether it's a pattern, an accelerator, or a blueprint. What we'll do is load it ourselves and give you the correct attributes as to where it came from to load it in there. If you are more comfortable, what you can do is you can fork the repository, check it in, and then we can actually merge that in once it's been curated and checked, and then it'll be available for everyone else to load in as well. Next steps, just before we wrap up here, to remember to register for next month's webinar. Again, there's two options for it. Here we'll be hosting a hot seat Q&A session around predictive maintenance and condition monitoring as well. Any questions, you can reach out to myself or our team for more information. And again, thank you all for attending today. Have a great rest of your day.